To know where he got his first writing opportunity. It was at school at Eastwoods, and Sally Ingram was the editor of the Eastwoods newspaper, and she had a very capable stringer, and his name was Evan Thomas, and he's here today. So he got his first chops locally. We're very pleased to invite Evan Thomas to be our 4th of July speaker. Thank you so much for being here.
It's so great to be back here and see that absolutely nothing has changed. I was here when I spoke in 1977. My grandfather, Norman, gave the first speech in about 1955. Thank you, Libby. Thank you, Matt. When I was little, and with my family driving down 25A, we'd go past the church and we'd see the harbor open up, and we'd say, 1, 2, 3, God's country. And it still is. It's just so green and beautiful. When I last spoke here, 48 years ago, I had just graduated from law school, and I did not want to be a lawyer. I thought, well, maybe I could be a journalist. I had worked for a law firm the summer before that represented the Wall Street Journal, so I thought, give them a try. I wrote a letter to the editor of the Journal, whose name I thought was Arthur Taylor. After I mailed the letter, I checked the masthead and saw that his name was Frederick Taylor.
Pretty close.
Not Arthur. So I quickly wrote him a second letter, apologizing, saying I was embarrassed for getting his name wrong. I got back a one-sentence letter, which I still have. It said, "Dear Mr. Thomas, you also misspelled embarrassed. Sincerely, Frederick Taylor." Fortunately, my wife, Osi, who's here, did want to be a lawyer, so there was somebody to pay the bills. Now we write history books together. On this glorious 4th of July, I want to talk about my favorite founding father, John Adams. He was our second president, only a one-termer, maybe not quite as famous as the other founders, George Washington and Jefferson and Ben Franklin. He had a tough act to follow. Our first president, George Washington, was tall and handsome and looked good on a horse. Adams was short and squat and definitely not handsome. Washington was stoic, he never complained, he always did his duty. Adams complained all the time. His feelings were easily hurt. He was thin-skinned and vain. But here's the thing, and it's an important thing. He knew himself. He knew he was flawed. And importantly, he knew that most people, including most leaders, were more like him than George Washington. So, when it came time to designing a government to run this brand new country, Adams had on his mind his own limitations and human fallibility, especially the lust for power and recognition and status. He knew how dangerous it was for the government to be ruled by one man who had absolute authority. After all, America had just revolted against the tyranny of King George III. Adams wanted a system of checks and balances on the exercise of government, on power. 3 branches of government that could check and balance each other, a separation of power. Along with the others, principally Madison, he wrote a constitution that created a government of laws and not men, governed by the rule of law, not the whims of one guy in power. Adams was also blessed to have a great wife, Abigail, who knew him even better than he knew himself. They could be honest with each other and also joke about it. Adams once wrote Abigail to complain about something, and he wrote, "What about me? What about my feelings?" Underneath he wrote, "Don't laugh." When Adams went off to write laws for the nation, Abigail famously wrote him, "Don't forget the ladies." But by and large, the founding fathers, those white guys in wigs, they did overlook the ladies, the right of women to be treated as equals. They also did not free the enslaved. It took the Civil War 80 years later to do that. Next year, we will celebrate the 250th anniversary of our country. It has been a long and winding and sometimes very difficult path. Almost 700,000 people died in the Civil War. We had a Great Depression, world wars, a great pandemic. We've had some bad leaders, who were selfish and short-sighted, but always, always, someone like John Adams has come along, someone who was flawed, as we all are, but who could appeal to what Abraham Lincoln called our better angels. It has been a long struggle, not over yet, but the great leaders know that people can change because they themselves can change. The first person who gave this 4th of July speech, standing right here where I'm standing, 67 years ago, 64 years ago, was my grandfather, Norman Thomas, who lived nearby on Goose Hill Road. Norman Thomas was a socialist. He ran for president 6 times in the first half of the 20th century. He never came close. In 1941, he was a pacifist, anti-war, and a prominent figure in the America First Committee that was trying to keep America from joining the war raging in Europe. In October of that year, this is before Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7th, his 21-year-old son, my dad, dropped out of college to join the fight, to fight with the British against the Germans in North Africa. You can imagine how upset my grandfather was, his own son joining a war that Norman was doing all he could to keep us out of. But Norman himself changed. He realized he couldn't be a pacifist. He couldn't be a pacifist. There was a war raging. Fascism was on the march. He had to do something. So he dropped his pacifism and he joined the war effort. When my father went to war, my grandfather wrote him a letter which said, "I have found that if God is disappointed in us, so must be the devil in the face of such courage and comradeship as plain people show. Even in the darkest times, people can do the right thing." That was true back in 1776. It was true in 1941, and I'd like to think it is true today. Thank you.
Thank you, Evan Thomas.